What's up,
Howdy
everyone?
ho.
Howdy. This week, it's not just going to be me as a talking head. We've got Mitch, my business partner here. Mitch, thanks for coming today and bringing your expertise.
Yeah, what's going on, everyone? People have heard enough of Grant's voice.
Yeah, we've had enough of
I'm
it.
just kidding.
I hear enough of it too. And when editing your own shows, sometimes you're like, I've heard enough of this. Like this is done. That's why you want to get someone else to edit your stuff.
For sure. We'll switch
So
it up today.
yeah, for sure. No, I'm excited. We've got good vibes. We got the ukulele. We've got the surfboards. Got some ukulele music to start off. And today we're talking about how knowing your audience will help you improve your content during the repurposing process. So we're going to talk about podcast repurposing, content repurposing, focusing though on how trying to be more clear on who your customer is, what problems they have, will help you create content that converts. So sounds good, right? That's what we're here for, right, Mitch?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. So
Let's run through it.
let's run through. First of all, I want to talk about the creator's journey. And this is kind of a journey that we've gone through, Mitch, in creating content on LinkedIn and in building our networks. Is that when you're first starting to get into video content and maybe podcasting or anything really, I think the most important thing is just getting started, like posting that first video. And for me, the time when I really started prioritizing LinkedIn specifically was when COVID happened. And you and I were going to a ton of networking events at that point and meeting people and building relationships that way. And that was great. We learned how to enjoy it. And we learned how to actually develop friendships that way and not just go in and try to pitch people. Then, had to learn how to network online, right? And really build out our brands authentically. And we gravitated towards video. But at that point, I was kind of posting videos about anything and everything, just trying it out. I think that's where most people start out. And that's good because the most important thing is getting started. But then you go through this next evolution where you want to grow your impact and you want more views. You say, all right, if only my content had more views, more likes, more comments, I would get clients. And that kind of, again, just leads you down like a spray and pray method of like, let's create funny, entertaining content, which is great and makes people laugh, but maybe isn't doing much for our business. And then the third evolution, I think, in your content journey is figuring out how to create content that converts. And in order to create content that converts, I think you have to be really intentional about knowing who you're selling to, knowing what issues they're facing. And it also, you have to realize that, yes, you want to grow your impact, you want to grow your views and your comments, things like that. But that's not the most important thing. What matters more is for who you're selling to, for who you're creating content to. With that being said, Mitch, passing it off to you for this part of the topic.
I'll come in hot. So like Grant said, the most important thing is just starting, because if you don't start, it doesn't matter who you're posting video to, you don't have any content. So once you start actually posting, it's important to start honing in on who you're posting for. And so if you're doing it for business, which most of us are, you're going to have to decide, who you're actually selling to. And a lot of times, like you might think it might be, a BDR, you're selling them some sort of sales software. But in reality, it might be their manager who's signing on the dotted line and actually being able to like make the payment for your service or product and whatnot. So you really need to be cognizant of who you're selling to. I have an example of this from back in my, I started a clothing company in college called The Gift Apparel. And I was selling basically from like, I thought it was like 18 to 25-year-olds, but realistically it was probably like 12 to 22-year-olds, 24-year-olds. And I always thought, I need to sell to these kids, these teenagers who would be into the clothing. But what I didn't take into account is that a lot of these kids, they don't have their own money yet, and their parents are actually a part of the decision-making process. So although I need to appease these kids, I need to appease their parents as well, or their guardian, whoever's actually making the purchase. So you don't only need to, appease the person you're selling the product or service to. It has to be the decision makers involved with it as well. And then once you know exactly who you're selling to through, basically just trial and error, like anything in life, you got to decide what part of the awareness process they're in. So do they know what you're doing in the first place? if they're not really sure what your product or service is, obviously you need to educate them on that. And then secondly, how you do it or how your service or product works is a good thing to show people. For us, like showing how our service works great, because then people can try it on themselves or try it for themselves. A lot of times it's a lot of work and effort, and sometimes people just want to outsource to you. So by showing them how, they'll learn a new skill, but they also might reach out to you and build a relationship instead of trying to take it all on themselves. And then, of course, the why is really important. And for instance, with our company, the why is we want to save people time and the stress of creating these videos, repurposing videos, especially if it's not their favorite thing or their strong suit. Like, they should focus on their strengths, and we can handle the rest. So that's kind of what you have to take into account when you're looking at, who you're actually making content for and what part of the awareness process you're in with them, and kind of bringing them down the funnel as you go. But that takes obviously a lot of trial and error, and Grant's going to speak more to that.
Yeah, because clarity is a process, and finding your audience is a process. And I think, Mitch, you and I right now are talking about finding your audience and how important it is, but it took us a long time, right? It took us longer than we expected, because and when we started the agency about 3 years ago together, we were going to our close personal connections. Some we had developed through Babson College, where we were roommates at and students at, some through family. And we were just saying, like, how can we help? And this kind of led us to really, it was great in getting started with projects, helping people with web design, with digital marketing strategy. But it wasn't scalable. It was, if you went to our website at the time, it was so vague. We weren't speaking to a specific audience. We didn't have a specific service. So yeah, while we're speaking about this right now, we haven't always had audience perfectly in mind. And I think that's something that you have to realize, is that don't beat yourself up if you haven't perfectly defined your audience yet. You don't just sit down day one when you start your business and write out your ICP, your ideal customer profile, who you're trying to sell to, and then it's perfect. It's never perfect. Like, you have to continuously revisit it. And, that's something I think that we will continue to hone in on as well with our business. But so just right now, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, I don't have an audience yet, like, I don't know who I'm speaking to, then that's okay. Realize it's a process, maybe monthly, quarterly, revisit who your ideal customer is, what their pain points are, and then use that ongoing, right? So you're not going to get this day one, but you do need to focus on nearing in on that audience in the long run. So as far as what this conversation relates to, though, is when you know your audience, you know their problems, you can improve the content that you repurpose from your podcast, from your live streams, from your webinars. So, Mitch, once you have that audience defined, like once you have their problems defined as well, how can we go ahead and select clips? What tools can we use that will help us create content that actually is helpful for our audience and actually helps push them along in the conversion process?
For sure. And just a little point to add, I just thought of while you were saying that, a lot of times you're just taking little steps to find your audience, and you don't really understand who your audience is until, like, in hindsight. Like, you kind of get there and then you look back and you're like, oh, this is my audience. So just take the little steps, even if you don't know, and you'll figure it out by looking back a little bit. But anyways, when we're selecting clips, our preferred method at Authentic is to use Descript, which is a super cool video editing tool. I'll pull it up right now.
Yeah, do a little share screen feature.
Yep. All right.
Awesome. All right, are you there yet?
Am I ready
Add
to
a
rock?
stream. You're ready to rock.
You can see my screen with the Descript?
Yes, we're good.
Cool. So it's a really cool video editing tool where you upload the video and then it transcribes it all, so we can see all the text. And then what's really nice is, say I wanted to just pick out a clip. and repurpose it, I could just go here, highlight it, and clip to composition, new, and it creates a new clip for me, which would be over here, down here. And then also a really cool thing too is you can remove filler words. So there's some ums in there, and you can apply to all, and it'll get rid of them all, which is really cool.
How many times did I say there? 499? What? That's crazy.
I don't need to do this right now. Oh, it's already doing it. We'll just let it be.
Yeah.
So another really cool feature, which when you're selecting clips for people, you know your audience more, you know what they're looking for. In this case, this is one of our clients, Joe Zanka. He has a podcast called Get It Done, which is about gritty stories of entrepreneurship. So he brings on different entrepreneurs and just people within the business world who think entrepreneurially, and kind of talks about their story of coming into whatever business they're in or different life stories. So a great word for him is, we'll start with entrepreneur, because that's kind of who he's speaking to, other entrepreneurs who are going through the struggle and are kind of looking for some solace or ideas or some support from some of his guests through their stories. So as you can see by control Fing entrepreneur, there's a lot of different points in the conversation where Grant's talking about entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur. And so then instead of just perusing the whole thing and listening to all 45 minutes, or I think this one's about an hour, you can just go look at specific clips that have to do with entrepreneurship. If that's, the key takeaway from that episode. Another one, which I had in earlier, you might have seen, is like journey. Because people talk a lot about their journeys on this podcast, the struggles they've been through, the highs and the lows. So by keyword searching that, it's very helpful. And as you kind of learn more who your audience is, you can kind of bring up these certain topics more, or as a podcaster or running a webinar or just creating videos, you can write down like the key points or key topics, and then you can control F and search these in Descript, which is awesome. So it really helps you select clips, saves you time if you're doing it yourself. And it just makes sure you're actually searching and getting clips that your audience cares about.
Bam. Yeah. They actually have to care about it. What are some other use cases? Like, for example, if you're selling to sales managers, or like you mentioned earlier, BDRs, business development representatives, you could always use the search function in Descript to search for when you're speaking directly to those individuals. If you're a sales manager, yada, 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 yada. If you're a business development representative, you may have this issue. So that's just going to save you a lot of time. The repurposing process is not only when you're thinking about, all right, what's our product or service, but when are we, in these conversations we have in the podcast or in the live streams, when are we speaking directly to our audience? So for us, for like repurposing this content, an example of that would be like when we're talking about solo entrepreneurs or small businesses, or content creators. Like those are all keywords that we could search that it's very likely that what was said right after that is relevant to them and will be helpful to them. So awesome. Anything else on selecting clips, Mitch, or should we move on?
Just like finding out who your audience is, it's trial and error of finding out what works best for your audience. So stick with some different stuff, try some different stuff, and then you'll find out what performs best on social.
For sure. And so sometimes we run out of content ideas. Mitch, like when you and I were running the e-commerce businesses, like, basically the business succeeded if we posted consistently. And
once a day, we were always trying to say. Yeah.
Once a day, we were always trying to say. It wasn't always easy though, because sometimes you feel like your content gets stale, or maybe you're just running out of ideas. You're in kind of a creative block. That's one of the beauties of repurposing, is that you always have stuff to pull from. But also, if instead of just thinking about your product or service, and instead you focus on your audience, I think this is really the shift of when you can start creating unlimited content ideas. So for instance, like Geico, they don't care too much about, they have a boring product. Let's be honest. Insurance, car insurance is quite boring. They don't care too much about continuously talking about their product or service, or educating us on that. That doesn't matter to them. But what they do know is they understand their audience. They understand what gets to them. They understand how to entertain them, right? So we can watch a Geico commercial and they may not even mention insurance at all, but they're trying to make us laugh and they're trying to bring attention to us. Another example of that is, again, so your content should be less focused on your product or service and more focused on what's applicable to your audience and serving them content that is relevant to them. So another example is like maybe if you run a rock climbing business and you understand your target market is 25 to 34-year-old, young professionals. If you're creating content online, you don't always have to be talking about rock climbing. Like you don't need to beat a dead horse there, but in understanding your audience, 25 to 34-year-old young professionals who maybe a lot of them are working remotely right now, maybe you could talk about exercises that they could do at home while they're behind their computer that will help them stay healthy and happy, right? It's not necessarily geared directly towards your product or service, rock climbing, but it is geared towards your audience and giving them value. So when you know your audience, you can then kind of reverse engineer from there and say, hey, what type of content will my audience care about? What will be helpful for them? Because at the end of the day, you need to care more about your audience than you care about your product or service. So I think that's a important brain switch to flip when you're running out of content ideas and when you're really trying to get nuance with your content strategy. So that kind of concludes our conversation around improving your content repurposing by knowing your audience. Mitch, do you have any final thoughts or anything you think we missed that we should mention?
No, I think hit the nail on the head. I'm sure there's always something, but people can always ask questions in the comments, or we can talk about it at a later date.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is fun. We gotta focus on number 3 right here. I think, Mitch, clarity is a process, and keep honing in on our audience, getting better with that. And I think everyone listening to this should as well, and just continuously revisit who your audience is, the problems they're having, and you're going to have some success. So that being said, thanks everyone.
Maybe you need to, yeah. All right. No, I was going to say, maybe you need to adapt your service or product to better serve those people first before even creating content around it too. So it's always important to take that into account.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And we've had to adapt our service multiple times in understanding that, right? Like you got to care more about your audience than you care about your product or service. If you're so focused on that little gadget or gizmo that you invented in your basement 15 years ago, and you just can't let go of it because it's just not, there's no product market fit, then that's an issue. You got to go back to the drawing board, create something new and fresh that your audience actually will care about. So sweet. How do we sign off together? How do we wrap it up? Like a burrito? Double peace signs?
High five the camera. 3, 2, 1.
Peace. Oh, I missed the